All right, so Jenifer Lawrence and I are going to be speaking for Kitsap County. I'm in the Stormwater Division of Public Works, and Jenifer is in our Community Development Department. Jenifer does the stormwater plan review when new plans come in, so we thought it would be good to give you kind of both of our perspectives on things. As you see, we have another photo of Manchester Stormwater Park. We're going to count and see how many of those we can find during the day today. I'm going to start off talking about our water as a resource policy, and then Jenifer will pop up here to talk about our site assessment and planning packet that we implemented as part of our new code. And then I'll go over a group exercise. You guys don't have to be involved in it. I'm just talking about it. That kind of describes how we tried to get developers to think differently when we did our code implementation. So in 2009, Kitsap County adopted a water as a resource, not a waste stream policy. There have been a few updates since then, but generally these 10 guiding principles are what we go by as a county as a whole. So this applies to any department within the county, not just to Public Works or it's for parks projects. Any plans, so our comprehensive plan has to use these guiding principles. The Parks Pros plan uses this. Our CFP plans use this. You see in the first column, those principles are very similar to all of the requirements we needed to meet for our recent LID updates in the code. And then the second column is kind of, this is the way we're going to get to it. So we're encouraged to continuously look for new technology and do research in the county. So that's kind of, if you see some innovation coming out of Kitsap County, that's because our commissioners encourage that. And with our asset program, we do quite a bit of replacement and retrofit, and then anytime like the roads department or anyone is going to do a project, we all come together and look at their project, and if there's an area that's outside of their limits of construction, we still look at that area if it doesn't have current water quality treatment, and we do water quality, and I can show you an example in a minute to kind of fix that problem. The codes and regulation, obviously we just did the big LID code update, so that kind of met that requirement, but going forward, when there's new codes and regulations, we have to show that this is supportive of the water as a resource policy. And then we do lots of outreach to our staff and our citizens. We just did a rate increase in the county, and we expected it kind of to be I was expecting pitchforks and torches to come to the meeting, and we just had a lot of support from people within the county, so I think we're doing a pretty good job with that one. And the thing that kind of keeps this moving along and makes it so it doesn't get swept under the rug is this annual report that has to get put out, obviously, every year. So in that report, each department tells what they did over the past year to implement these principles. And how they're working, and then they also tell what they're going to do in the next year. So we have short and long-term goals in there. Here's an example of a project. I don't know how well you can see it, but this was going to be a pump station upgrade project in Keyport, and you see there's 2 pump stations on there. We looked at it. There was no water quality controls or runoff controls, and Puget Sound is right there at the bottom of the hill, right there. And so we installed, this is all permeable pavement, they're all pavers along here. There's some bioretention cells there, and we put a swell here. So we're treating everything in this whole area that was previously untreated coming into the area. Now sometimes you go to a roads project, and we have one coming up in Silverdale, and they say, well, do you have any pipes you want to replace? And now their project has become more of a stormwater project than it is a roads project. But since we have the support from the commissioners, we're allowed to do that. We just have to find the funding to get it done. So the top is a picture of Keyport before. looking down the hill towards Puget Sound, and then the pictures on the bottom are some of the improvements we made out there. So it's obviously more than just a water quality benefit. The neighborhood gets a good benefit. It's good for property values. And I did put one picture. This was the one complaint we got. This lady also complained to the commissioners, and she was upset that we had a design flaw, but in-house we think that it was really her, not us. So. All right, Jenifer's going to tell you about our planning packet.
Good morning. I'm glad I wasn't the person driving that car. So we've been talking about stormwater management and low impact development, and one of the things that Kitsap County has done is take the information out of the low impact development technical guidance manual and make a site assessment and planning packet, a little extractable appendix right out of our stormwater manual that all developers from the single family residence homeowner to a new mall or industrial complex use this tool to analyze, and they do it before design to make an inventory and analysis of key project components of the site to maximize potential development opportunities while minimizing project-related stormwater impacts by implementing minimizing impervious surfaces, loss of vegetation, and minimizing runoff. So the site assessment and planning packet, oops, there we go, contains several key project component steps that influence the design, project boundaries and structures, soils, critical areas, topography, hydrologic patterns and features, dewatering, vegetation, land use controls, access, and utilities. Backwards. I don't know if you can see this very well, but right in the middle of that slide is a large undeveloped parcel surrounded by existing development. So the first step in this key inventory and analysis to assess the site is to look at your project boundaries and setbacks and surrounding development to see what might constrain or guide the development. And in this case, we have buildings on the north and west that would need to be considered as far as possible stormwater or grading impacts. And that project has recently come in for review. It's not approved yet. They did their site assessment and planning and took a look at their project boundaries. They did they looked at their soils and found the geotechnical and subsurface investigations showed not a good site for infiltration. Besides some moderate slopes, some wetlands on the west, they also had high groundwater and hard pan. So they decided infiltration or dispersion was not going to work for this project. But they did go through the site assessment and planning packet. And I can't not read that from here. Or there. And they just went through the list. They put in their project information, where the project is. I'll have to open my packet here. Sorry, this font is not bigger, but you do have this packet in your workbook, both in the slides and then the site assessment and planning packet is extracted there near the back of section 4, I believe. All right, so on this slide, the project boundaries and structure information goes in as well as the soils. Critical areas, they found wetlands on that parcel. It was a category 1 critical aquifer recharge area, so residential development was fine for that category. They looked at dewatering. They thought that based on the level of the groundwater, that it would depend on the season whether they needed to provide dewatering or not. They looked at the topography It was rolling and moderate with that wetland on the west. And then they looked at the hydrologic patterns and features, their subbasins, existing drainage swales and ditches. They found a swale located in the southwest corner of the site that they wanted to preserve. They looked at the native vegetation and evaluated where they could keep mature trees up in the northeast corner, as you saw on that map, which we'll show you again in a minute. They've got 17 acres, and using aerial mapping and field observations, figured that they had about 1,000 trees greater than 4-inch diameter at breast height. This was not an official tree survey. The county is not requiring that, but just the best you can do with the tools available, aerial mapping, site visit. You might count a 20 by 20 spot and then extrapolate, see about how many trees you've got. And then you need to look at your land use controls. Zoning and comprehensive plan designation obviously affect what you can do on the site. So this is an urban, medium, high-density residential site, so the use that they're proposing fits with the land use controls. And they analyzed for access, knowing the street classification. Let's see. There we go. Street classification helps with knowing what frontage improvements you might expect, sidewalks, curb and gutter, and possible lane or bike lane improvements as well. And then the last key analysis component is utilities existing, any possible conflicts. You want to look at both wet and dry. 811 is your friend. You want to call them early and get that utility analysis as part of your early pre-design information. And then once you've gathered all these key components, you can go and chart what the existing condition is, your tree canopy, your hard surface area, and then the proposed condition to see what happens with the development you're proposing and see where you can cluster development, distribute and minimize your footprint by distributing the stormwater so you don't have one big area that has a heavy pollutant loading. Instead, you're distributing it through the site. And then finally, this section E of the site assessment and planning packet is your potential low-impact development green stormwater solution matrix. Starting with soil amendment, which in this case is feasible. It almost always is. Full dispersion was not feasible for this site due to slopes and lack of flow path. Bioretention was feasible, so even though they ended up with some stormwater ponds, they're implementing LID where they can through bioretention and perforated stub-out connections for their homes. They're retaining existing trees, a big cluster in the northeast corner. I'll show you this map again in a second. And then they are planting new trees as well. And so that's the composite map for this site assessment and planning packet, which again is a pre-designed planning tool that involves research of available documents and also field observations and some subsurface soil investigations to see how and where you can implement low-impact development and how you might be able to design your site to minimize impervious, maximize vegetation retention, and minimize pollutant runoff. And as you can see at this site, they do have 4 ponds, but they avoided putting it all in one great big, who called that a stormwater prison earlier, and distributed it the best they could and added bioretention here. And that's it. And we'll have time for questions at the end. And now I'm going to hand it back over to Angela.
Okay, so when we implemented our new code, we had to do a training. Of course, we have a new design manual, and there's a lot to know in the new code. And I didn't want people just sitting there drooling all day because they're just listening to someone talk. So we made a interactive exercise to try to get them to think a little differently when they're doing their design. I don't know how many times I heard complaining, but we've always done it this way and it's been fine. That's probably the most annoying thing anyone could ever say. But so again, we're going through the site assessment and planning packet. I gave them a hypothetical office park. I just wanted to give them a simple development that had already been developed using the old code, traditional stormwater, the different old parking standards and all of that. So what they're going to do is take this site and redevelop it using the new code. So we gave them the pre-development conditions. These were the conditions that were existing prior to that medical park going in. And we gave them a little extra information about like critical areas and things like that, but they had to look at this site and try to protect as much of the native vegetation on site as possible, and of course reduce the impervious surface on site and all of that. Here's just some additional site info showing them utilities, and so they could figure out what their setbacks were going to be, and where they were located as far as vicinity to streams. So basically we just gave them this kind of their base map that they used, and it shows the topography, and they went through the site assessment and planning packet and redeveloped this site. It was really difficult for them to do the first time around. We've done training since. We've done about 90 people. I think we've done training for about 90 people, but the first training we had all of the kind of major developers in Kitsap County come, and it was very difficult for them to do it. And some of them were frustrated and they couldn't. Like this ended up with just like chicken scratch on it and no real plans. But then we just recently had a 2-day rain garden workshop, and we did this same exercise at the end of that, and we had a lot better results. So this was just kind of our way to get them to interactively think outside of the box, because they look at the code, they've been doing it this way all along, and they just want to tweak the way they're doing it to meet up with the code, but really they need to step back and look at everything a little differently. So, questions?